Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk to you about the nonfiction books that I will never declutter or KonMari out of my life. I've already talked to you about the fiction books that I never plan on getting rid of. We are in the midst of a great purge at our house right now, and as I look through everything, I've really decided there's certain things that I'm just not ever going to get rid of. So I wanted to share with you some of those. So first up is You Learn by Living by Eleanor Roosevelt. This is kind of a small pocket guide. I actually read the first one from the library, and so I went and picked this one up. I haven't gotten to mark this one up yet. I love the illustration of Eleanor Roosevelt on the front. It's really just a great guide by the woman herself on what she thinks makes a good life. And I would underline most of these, as well as get t-shirts with almost all of the stuff printed on it. So that's why I've chosen that one. Next up is An Altar in This World by Barbara Brown Taylor, A Geography of Faith. For me, the older I get, the more I realize that moments of faith and moments of the divine come from the mediocre, mundane parts of being, whether it's cleaning the kitchen floor over and over again, or touching somebody who isn't used to being touched just on their hand, or I don't know, writing a note to someone. These are little things. Walking in the woods, that she talks about the sacred moments that she has found more and more on in a regular life, and I really appreciate this. So next is Tish Oxenreider's At Home in the World. This is a book about her and her family's trip around the world. She is a blogger, podcaster that I followed for a very long time, and she, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, went on a trip around the world with her children and her husband. And this book, first of all, if you love reading travel, it's one of those books that makes you smell the curries and feel sweaty if you're in a hot place. It's just reading about it. She does a great job with descriptions, and I really appreciate that, especially for traveling. She also made me really appreciate my parents and the value that they put on traveling, and made me really aspire to do more and more of that with my kids. Next up is Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Wooden's Half the Sky. This book, for me, I think I read maybe a decade ago for the first time, opened up a lot more conversations and topics that I hadn't studied previously about women's issues. The idea is women really do hold up half the sky, or sometimes more of it, and the issues that face women affect whole families a lot of times. And so I really appreciated their outlook on this, and it made me feel like doing more research, which is always a good nonfiction, I think. Next up is one that I know a lot of people kind of scoff at, but it is Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love. For me, Italy is my favorite place on the planet. India is probably the place that I went that changed me the most. It's still changing me, honestly, every time I think about it. I have not been to Indonesia yet, but I really appreciate her outlooks on self-nourishment. I love the chapter when she's talking about when she's sitting down and trying to do yoga, and there's all these mosquitoes flying around her, and she can't focus, and she just wishes that she could have them leave her alone so she could meditate and focus. But really, honestly, you're not able to focus well and be a master at focusing if you can't do it when there's a bunch of mosquitoes swirling around you. Because that's what life is, isn't it? Like all the mosquitoes swirling around you, bugging you, poking at you, annoying you, telling you you're not this and you're not that. And to find peace even in the midst of that is really the trick. And I adore this book, and I've read it several times, and I don't care if people think it's silly. The movie was not worth it, even though I like Julia Roberts. Not the same. Next up is TheHallelujah Life by Richard Propst. This is lesser known. It's a very short little volume. It does have some poetry in it, as well as some personal reflections. This is written by a friend of mine, one of the most amazing men I know, I think. He is a man who's gone through a lot: homelessness, he's spina bifida, he is a double leg amputee, and he's also a fierce advocate for children and domestic violence survivors. He's done a lot of work on awareness. He's done cross-statewide trips in his wheelchair on the road bring up awareness about these issues. And I just, reading this was like reading his diary. It felt very vulnerable, broke my heart a lot. But reading a couple of these things in here, again, touched the part of me that enjoys reading about those people who are looking for the sacred, especially in the horrible ugliness that sometimes happens in life. And I adore this book for that. I've given it several times and I really, really love it. Next up is one I have not read yet. This is Princess Alice, a biography of Alice Roosevelt Longworth by James Bro. This was given to me by my grandma, who is another reader. I think I was in middle school maybe, and I just put it on my shelf. I did like the cover of it. I do like Alice Roosevelt. I think she was just a spitfire. Probably reminds me of my grandma a little bit, who gave it to me. But the reason I've not read it yet, I think, is because I'm saving it for when I really miss her. It's not that I haven't already, but having it on my shelf makes me feel like she just gave it to me. So I don't know if that's silly. I don't really care, but that's probably why I haven't read it yet. Next up is How to Be a Woman by Caitlin Moran. She is another one that I know some people have very different feelings about. She doesn't talk about feminists outside of the white experience. She is from the UK, but she's a comedian, and I love so many of these chapters. There's one chapter on here on body hair removal and why it's ridiculous, and why it puts women at a disadvantage, not only of losing time resources, but money resources, and just all the caring that goes into body hair removal. Like, for somebody to write so frankly about that just made me love it. I also really appreciate that she has a chapter on why to have kids, and then another on why not to have kids. One of the reasons she says why to have kids is because you'll never realize how much you can do in 15 minutes until you have kids. And that is so true. I mean, just like spot on. And so, yeah, I've given that out as gifts before too. Next up is one I just got. I've not read it yet. Well, I got it at Christmas. This is John Steinbeck's A Life in Letters. My husband gave it to me for Christmas because, as much as he's probably annoyed that I am a John Steinbeck aficionado, he knows that I really wanted it. So this is just all of his letters put together in a book, and I want to read through it, probably similarly to another book that I'm going to show you. Because it's John Steinbeck. He knows life. I don't know. Next up is No Drama Discipline by Daniel Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. This book I honestly need to have on audio, just playing on a repeat loop in my head until I've just absorbed it. It has some really great strategies on how to discipline. I feel like I'm sucking at a few of them right now. I'm trying to do better. That's life, right? But I really appreciate this, and honestly, I probably should just reread it every month with all my extra time. Next is The Impossible Will Take a Little While, A Citizen's Guide to Hope in a Time of Fear. This is edited by Paul Roget Loeb, and it's essays by various world leaders, advocates, activists. I've not read through the whole thing, to be perfectly honest, but it's just such a valuable trove of information, and I'm excited about going through it with my kids when they get more like teenage years. So next up is Donald Miller's A Million Miles in 1,000 Years, What I Learned While Editing My Life. And Donald Miller is the same man who wrote Blue Like Jazz, which is an okay book. But what I like about this book is it talks about his experience working with movie makers to change Blue Like Jazz into a movie. And they talk about how they had to change certain events of his life to make the movie flow. Because when you're telling a story, you need to put your character in, not necessarily in danger all the time, but you have to keep putting obstacles in front of them to make people care, to make them grow as characters. And so he started to think about that for his own life and what it would mean if he intentionally put obstacles in front of himself to grow and change and become better. And I just thought that was brilliant. I've used that so many times in workshops. I've talked about this book. I'm actually probably due for a reread on it. But yeah, I love the way he talks about this and making your life a story. It's a great one for readers. Next up is the one I referred to earlier. This is Dear Theo, an autobiography of Vincent van Gogh, edited by Irving Stone. These are his letters to his brother Theo. And I slowly read through this. It's almost like a devotional or a poetry book, to be honest. I haven't gotten through all of it yet because I just, whenever I feel like I need him, he's there for me, just like John Steinbeck. And so, yeah, I probably should move it closer to my bed because I don't have my book of poetry there anymore. But Dear Theo is a great one. Vincent van Gogh had so many interesting thoughts about faith and poverty and what's essential and how to love people. All the feelings. Next up is Cold Tangerines by Shauna Niequist. And honestly, I would probably keep any of her other ones that I have as well. Shauna Niequist is a Christian writer, but she writes little essays on life. And some of her quotes are just juicy and evoke so much spirit and kindness. Again, I like spirit and kindness and intentional living, so I'm here for that. Next is Van Gogh, and this one, I have not finished this one either because it's enormous, but I love it. This one is by, what can I remember? It is by Stephen Knife and Gregory White Smith, and it's just more Van Gogh, so there's that. This next one I've given as gifts several times, especially for wedding presents. This is Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski, The Surprising New Science That Will Transform Your Sex Life. What I love about this is that she doesn't say this is how you should do things or this is what's normal. She says, I will help you figure out how to communicate what you enjoy, what is normal for you, and how to better communicate that with your partner. You come away from reading this feeling empowered and beautiful and just enough. And I love that. I think more people should have this. So if you are a female or you are a person who loves a female, I recommend this book. Next up is Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. This is the tactics, routines, and habits of billionaires, icons, and world-class performers. I love Tim Ferriss's podcast quite a bit, even though they're very long. But Tools of Titans he interviewed so many different people across spectrums of expertise and asked them what are their tricks and tools for living. And I think it's just one of those troves of information that I will keep going back to over and over again. I would give this book to anybody, male or female, young, old, doesn't really matter. Maybe not a 6-year-old. But other than that, I think it just really hits the mark for teaching different ways people do things, and some of the things will go against each other, so you really have to figure out what works for you, and I love that. And finally, another one that I've not finished, Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin. I love Lincoln. I will eventually finish this. My husband's read through it already. I don't know why I haven't yet, but Team of Rivals, it's a good one. I don't know. I guess maybe when I finish it, I'll be done, which will be nice to be able to say I'm finished, but then I'll be done. I don't know. Does anybody else have this problem? So those are the nonfiction books that I will never, ever get rid of. I would love to know, how do you feel about any of these? What are your nonfiction must-haves? And if you have any questions, put them down below in the comments. Talk to you later. Bye.